Hey fellas, Mike Yarbrough here. Welcome back to another episode of the Wolf and Iron podcast. This is a Truck Talk Thursday episode, so happy Truck Talk Thursday to you. Well, I want to talk today about something called the law of accelerating returns, some futuristic kind of things, and how we can really apply this and how this does apply to us as men. But before I jump into that, I just wanted to welcome anyone who's listening for the very first time. You're checking out Wolf and Iron, you're wondering what this podcast is. These episodes are a little bit different. So on Thursdays, we release something called Truck Talk Thursday. It's really just me talking to you guys from my truck about whatever I have on my mind that I think would be interesting for men to hear. So it's off the cuff, it's informal, and sometimes I'll talk about whatever I see on the roadside as well, if there's anything crazy going on. But I appreciate you being here. And look, if you want to find out a little bit more about what Wolf and Iron is all about, head over to our free Facebook group and check that out. wolfandiron.com/the group. If you head over to that link, that'll take you over to our free Facebook group, and you'll be presented with some questions to answer there. We don't let just anybody in. We try to keep the riffraff out, keep the caliber of men high over there. And you'll be able to see some of the discussions that are going on and learn a little bit more about heeding the high call on your life as a man. So, years ago when my wife and I were struggling with our marriage, and we'd probably had been married for 10, 12 years at the time, one of the things that was a scary thought, just kind of coming to the brink of, basically our marriage was about failing. Our marriage was failing, but it wasn't yet a failure. And one of the scary thoughts we had was, how long is it going to take for us to figure this thing out so that we can actually enjoy being around each other, so that our marriage works, so that we're on the same page about parenting and so many other topics? Because if we've spent 12 years already, and this is as far as we've got, this is a really, really slow pace, and it's going to suck. We don't want to do this for another 10, 12, 20 years. Until we just finally get things figured out. And thankfully, you don't have to. Thankfully, you grow faster than you expect. And so now we are at 22 years in our marriage, and I can tell you that things are much, much better. Marriage is still hard. I mean, life is just challenging. There's always throwing something our way. We both have a crazy background, and not the best examples of parenting, and I didn't always listen to the good examples I did have. But I've got some things figured out, and we certainly love each other more, and we're more committed than ever. And we don't get in as many fights, and there's a lot of ways that we've grown, and certainly as a man, I've grown in tremendous ways. I'm an entrepreneur now and successful in that area. My sons are doing well, and communication with my wife is much better. My leadership abilities are much more improved, and all these things seem to have happened rather quickly. And I think Ray Kurzweil, if you guys might know him as the futurist, the transhumanist, the inventor, the guy who made the Kurzweil machine, piano emulating keyboard back in the day. And he's got this theory. It's called the law of accelerating returns. And he really applies it to technology. And he says that where we're going to be in the next 10 or 20 years, I think actually he says that what we're going to experience in the next 200 years will be more like 20,000 years of development based on the past, just because of the law of accelerating returns. And we see this, happening pretty quickly inside of technology. So just the internet, right? I mean, some of you guys have been around long enough. Most of you guys, imagine listening to this, have been around long enough when you remembered when the flip phone came out, and that was cool because you could fold a phone. That was a neat thing, right? And the screen was separate from the rest of the phone, and it had like this colorized LCD type of thing going on. That was big time. And it seems like in no time flat, here we are, we've got, right now I'm recording this podcast on my phone. If I wanted to, I could be using my GPS, I could be listening to music all at the same time, while the phone is also keeping my email up to snuff, updating apps in the background. There's all kinds of stuff that's happening, right? And not only is it possible because the bandwidth has gotten better, but the computer, the processing speed, the memory has gotten smaller and faster and better and all that kind of stuff. And so it's obvious in technology that we're accelerating at a tremendous pace. And while I'd love to talk about all the potential repercussions of that, when we start doing implants and things like that in our bodies, I'll avoid that for now. But I do want to talk about how we have something like this going on for us as men, and I hope this gives you guys some hope as you're probably in a place where you want to grow and you want to, become a better kind of man, a different kind of man maybe. Perhaps there's an area in life that you really want to grow in. Maybe it's entrepreneurship, kind of like some of the things that I've been involved in. And you're thinking, that's such a freaking long road, Mike. I don't know if I want to go down this road. Am I ever going to get there? Well, let me tell you, you can, and you can do it much more quickly than you think. And it's the law of accelerating returns happens as we learn new information for us. And so to kind of give you just a quick example, let's say that you're reading a book on fatherhood, all right? And you're learning about how to be a good dad, you're learning about how to deal with unruly teenagers, you're learning about how to incorporate your kids' ideas into more of the chores in the house and that kind of stuff, how they want to do things. Whatever it is, you're reading this book, it's a good book, and you take the information in and you grow as a father, right? And then you go read a book, we'll say you read my book on The Guy's Guide to Pocket Knives, okay? And so it's got a little section in there about whittling, and you read something about whittling, right? Now what happens here is your brain starts to make connections, and you start to go, okay, I've got some whittling information, and I've got some good fatherhood information, and you start to think, how can I put these things together? Oh, I could actually create a project with my son or my daughter, and we could whittle some stuff. Maybe you can make a sopalo. That's one of the examples in the book. So you guys decide to work together, and you start whittling some things out, and you're growing as a father, not just in these two areas of fatherhood and whittling or knife knowledge, these separate things, but you're growing as a man all around, because now you're developing these sort of interpersonal skills. And you're putting things into practice. Hopefully you're reading more than 2 books a year. And if you are, all these things are having these multiple touches, right? You're reading books on philosophy. You're listening to podcasts on whatever we're talking about here. You're listening to podcasts on entrepreneurship. You're listening to podcasts on being a better husband. And you begin to make this sort of network in your mind. And these things start to play off of each other. And what happens is you accelerate your growth as a man far more quickly than you would have imagined previously. And it seems to be, and I've noticed this with a lot of guys, it seems to be that you're kind of like, it feels like you're struggling, you're kind of working, you're excited, but it's, you're not quite there yet. And then all of a sudden things start coming together. Things start making sense. And not only that, but you begin to have ideas about life, about fatherhood, about marriage, about leadership. And you begin to have these sort of notions, and then what you find out is that somebody else has written a book on the notions that you've already had. And so that you see now that you're starting to play on a different level. You're starting to think on a different level. And that's really what's happened with me with Wolf and Iron. It's happened with marriage and a number of other areas in life. And so I can attest to this. And I've seen this in the same kind of growth for a lot of guys. And so fellas, the reason that I say this is to give you encouragement. You might be at that spot where you're thinking, man, I really want to grow in some area, but it seems like such a long road. Let me just tell you, it's not as long a road as you think, because of the law of accelerating returns, or the law of just your brain is awesome. And that's the other law that I like. So I hope you guys find that helpful. Love any feedback on this. Love to hear about how you guys are growing. Obviously, you can talk about this over at our free Facebook group, the Wolf and Iron Community. wolfandiron.com/the group. If you can't tell, I say this quite often. That URL, but it's a fantastic group of guys over there having some great conversations. So check that out, and let us know how you're growing as a man, and maybe some books you've read, some podcasts you're listening to, the things that have really influenced you in the last 6 months or a year, and the changes that you see. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Okay, fellas, that's all I got for today. Talk to you later.